Well, the role of the telecommunications regulator, the ACMA, has been in the spotlight given its response to the behaviour of radio talkback star Carl Sandilands and the findings of the Finkelstein inquiry that recommends a super media regulator. Well, to tell us more about all of this and a number of other issues, we're joined by the ACMA chairman, Chris Chapman. Chris, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks, Bridie.
I guess just firstly wanted to ask you about Carl Sandilands and the fact that the ACMA imposed this second licence, an additional licence condition on Southern Cross Austereo. The company's described it as onerous, says that it's all been because of people who don't even listen to the actual show. Just take us through your thinking in that 2-month investigation and the results of it.
Well, what we've done is propose a licence condition, and subsequent to that you sit down with the broadcaster and you deal with their concerns, and there's always concerns. We imposed a licence condition on Today 2 years ago with that previous Kyle, inverted commas, incident. And the final licence condition that we did impose was different to the one we initially proposed. So there is a very well-worn course of action. That requires us to listen to the licensee's concerns. You describe them as onerous. I think they would describe them as disproportionate to the offence. And we've done that. We've been in some interesting discussions with them, and we're close to announcing our final licence condition. So that decision's imminent. What we did in any event was to, in effect, take the code provision and uplift it into a proposed licence condition. The code provision dealing with indecency, or not broadcasting indecent material. And we also added a further licence condition with respect to demeaning wording towards women. So there were some training provisions, but that was the essence of it. That's what we've proposed. We've taken on board the licensee's concerns, who they feel is disproportionate, and we'll be announcing that soon. It's a very serious issue, this licence condition. We proposed a licence condition that is right across the station, 24/7 for 5 years, and very, very serious.
Are you able to give us any range of sort of the scope of what you could do?
Well, it'd be uncharted territory, as they say in Australian broadcasting history, but a licence condition further breached leads to the possibility of remedial directions by us to the broadcaster, and a failure to comply with the remedial direction leads to fines, tens of thousands of dollars per day. It could lead to suspension or the revocation of the licence, but you know, that's at the very extreme end. Yeah. So any of those options are very serious, and the licence condition proposed was considered by the authority to be commensurate with the grossly derogatory nature of the breach.
Are you happy with your powers that you basically can impose these on the company rather than go after the actual person who's made the comments? It's in effect then having to force the company to make its employee do the correct thing.
Well, there's lots of issues about our powers. The one you're alluding to is whether our powers should be direct with the talent.
Yeah.
I'm not a believer in that. Our relationship is with the licensee. They're the ones that has the privity between us and them. They're the ones who have the benefit of the spectrum. So I think it's entirely appropriate that our relationship's with the licensee. They're the manager of the talent. They can do whatever they like in terms of hiring and firing. They're the ones who need to have the appropriate corporate governance. So I know lots of people feel that there's various action we should take towards the talent. I just absorb that and simply say that I think it's appropriate that our relationship's with the licensee.
This is sort of connected, I guess. We've seen 2 other inquiries, the Finkelstein and the Convergence Review, both associated with calls for perhaps a super regulator or a stronger regulator. How could this potentially affect what the ACMA does?
Well, in addition to that, there's the recent National Classification Scheme review, which was done by the ALRC in the Attorney General's jurisdiction. And they were looking at not dissimilar issues about the harmonisation, that's the big buzzword, the harmonisation of a lot of the rules and regulations that touch on media. And so as a bucket of initiatives, they've all rolled up to stating the bleeding obvious that the traditional analogue view of media and communications in this country, not only in Australia but internationally, has run its course or is on the cusp of running its course. I mean, the ACMA itself has been a very active contributor. We put out a paper last year, or two papers. One was called Broken Concepts. It's very unusual for the regulator to get above its station, but we put out a concept called Broken Concepts, where we took the main pieces of legislation that we're responsible for, Broadcasting Act, Telecommunications Act, the Radio Communications Act, and highlighted 57 fundamental concepts or constructs that had run its course as we move from analogue to digital. The ACMA is very well positioned to, in effect, be that super regulator, if indeed the government chose to go that way. We are already across most of those issues. We work in those technical standards. We deal with those codes. We have very strong relationships with the stakeholders, and we have a growing confidence as to how to move in that space. And I think we've demonstrated over the last few years that we're capable of living in the current regulated world and facilitating outcomes in the new world. So I'm not getting in advance of the government decisions, but I'm very impressed by the way staff at the ACMA understand that dynamic environment.
Just wanted to ask you, I mean, 3D seemed to be the thing a couple of years back. Seems to have died off, but you've allowed Nine to broadcast some 3D TV trials during the Olympics. Have you had a lot of interest from broadcasters to do this, and how much additional spectrum does it take?
The 3D, as you allude to, has been hot and cold. I mean, the broadcasters look for big events to galvanise public attention and to also justify the investment. So I think the Nine Network did it a couple of years ago on the State of Origin. I think SBS did it on the World Cup football. Soccer, yeah. I know Foxtel has done it in 3D, but with respect to the spectrum, it's Nine and SBS. We want to always facilitate technical innovation. Nine wanted to do the Olympics highlights. We've found spectrum for them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, Gold Coast. We're using that A and B spectrum. You remember from the previous Howard government's A and B class spectrum that has been around since digitalisation has been a reality. That spectrum will be far less available post the digital dividend issue. So there's a limited window at the moment to do those trials. We were happy to try and facilitate that. The big thing I would caution all your viewers is to make sure that they're in a viewing area, because not all viewing areas will be able to access it, and there are very strong consumer protections related to our approval. We work with the ACCC to make sure that the consumer message is out there that you're not buying a TV set if you're in an area that can't receive the 3D coverage.
Just on that spectrum auction, a digital dividend spectrum auction, some people's eyes glaze over a little bit, and I'm not totally on top of it all. You've had some guidelines recently released. What's going to happen? Just explain it to us. What is that?
Yeah, I think you're referring to last week or the week before we released our draft instruments. That's the technical term for the rules of the road, both with respect to what we're selling and how we're going to sell it. So we sell spectrum like an auctioneer or a real estate agent would sell land. We take spectrum, we cut and slice and dice it, we package it up, and we present it beautifully to the market. That's our role. We're a manufacturer. Now, the digital dividend is what we're talking about here. When Australia completes its move from analogue spectrum to digital spectrum, we're about 98% digitalised across Australia. I make that number up, but there's only remote pockets of Australia that aren't yet digital. We then see the broadcasters turn off their analogue. Digital spectrum is far more efficient than analogue because you can get a lot more data into any given amount of spectrum. And we take back the spectrum that's not required. So if that was the original amount, broadcasters now broadcast in that. We take that and we clean it up and put it out for sale, which we're going to do under this auction. And we issued the rules of the road draft. And that we'll be ready for that auction towards the end of this year. And it'll probably be bought by the big telcos who will use it for their fourth generation LTE So in a nutshell, that's a very simple answer to a very long question. Very complicated.
Good, I understand a lot better now too.
Chris, I'm sorry, we're going to have to wrap it up. We've run out of time, but I just also wanted to mention, of course, that the film that the ACMA produced about cyber safety, of course, winning some recognition too around the world.
I didn't know you'd picked up on that. No,
Very well done
our
tag.
Cyber Smart Tagged won a silver medal in the New York Film Festival in America last week. And it's just another example of the work we do in Australia in the cyber smart area that's getting international recognition. So thank you for mentioning that.
Well done. Thank you so much, Chris.
Pleasure. Nice to see you. Thanks, James.
Coming up on Media Week, a check on the ratings with James Manning.